Hey everyone, it's Andre Luck here to share my video for this week where I'm going to close the loop on a series that I did around sales leadership and creating a winning sales culture. So, over the past few months, I've shared a video each week highlighting a different topic. So, what I'll do today is kind of give you the Cliff Notes version. If you don't want to go back and watch every single video, I encourage you to get my views up. I was actually at Career Day the other day, and I had shared with my daughter's class that I have a YouTube page, and they were asking how many subscribers and views I had. They were a little under impressed and underwhelmed with the number of views and subscribers. So, not a real YouTuber yet, so I'll work on that. So, if you get the views up, that'd be great. But yeah, I'll talk through all the different topics we talked about. Really, the ultimate goal of creating a winning sales culture that not only succeeds in the short term, but is building for the long term. So it's sustainable. You're seeing growth, you're seeing revenue improvements. And a lot of that starts with leadership. So that's key and first and foremost for a lot of leaders. So to kick it off, I just touched on what does it look like to create a winning sales culture and some of the elements that embody what a winning sales culture looks like. And I think internally we know what it feels like. And when you're part of a great culture, you know, but it's hard to articulate. So I did my best to kind of put descriptive words around it and what that looks like. And the first one that I've seen from winning teams in general, and obviously that applies to sales as well, and the culture you create is having a diverse team, differences of thought, differences in levels of experience, backgrounds, especially like in your market. You want to make sure that you represent and reflect the market that you're selling into. So having diversity so you can hit all types of different buyers and segments and things like that. If you have one type of person or one type of seller and like you say, this is what it needs to look like to be on our team, then you're one, turning away a lot of talent that could potentially join your team, but also crippling your ability to think innovatively and creatively to bring in differences of thought. So you want to have a diverse group, all different thoughts and beliefs and backgrounds when you're looking to create that top-notch winning sales culture. Also, you want to find a culture that's a balance between being competitive and collaborative. Obviously, you want them to compete. And one of the teams or one of the organizations I'm working with right now, we're moving some of their service people, customer service people, to more of a sales role where they're sales minded. And it's been really cool to watch the growth and now the internal competition within them, but in a collaborative way. They want everyone to win, but they want to be the top person within that team. Because you have someone that's too competitive, obviously that could turn off the rest of the team and create a bad culture and environment. And I've seen that happen as well. So you want to strike that balance between getting people who are about the team, but they're going to push each other to be the best version of themselves and be competitive. Then also you want to make sure that you're working across departments. I've been in organizations where everyone's siloed and they just focus on their one goal, and for lack of a better word, that's selfish. But then I've also been part of organizations where they're very collaborative and they're challenging different thoughts across different departments. They're all bought into the ultimate vision, which aligns at the executive level to the top level goals, and they work across departments to make sure that they achieve that. And there aren't these individual silos. So that was the first topic we covered. Then in the next week, I talked about recruiting and retaining top performers. So if you're going to have high level sellers and an all-star sales team, you need to make sure that you're getting and keeping the best people. So from a presence standpoint and making sure that you're out there, that you're public, so you can attract the right talent, almost building your own brand from like a marketing standpoint. How are you branding your team? How are you branding your department? One thing I did when I became a vice president of sales is I really wanted to change the perception of our department, of our organization. So I started getting a lot more active on LinkedIn and getting out there and just sharing about myself. And what that led to is attracting the people who resonated with me and my style and my beliefs and my values. And some of my best talent came from people that messaged me like, hey, I liked your post, or hey, I like that video you did. I'm looking at opportunities to get into sports, so I'd love to learn more about joining your team. And those people ended up being some of our best performers. And even if there weren't people that directly met me, they knew about me and my values and my team. So when they were considering opportunities to apply for, I think it definitely increased the ability. So I would encourage all leaders, especially if you're at the top of the department and organization, to have that brand. You don't have to post every day like I do on LinkedIn, but just being active, being out there, and being personal so people can relate to you and understand what you're about and your background and your beliefs and everything like that. Then once you're in that recruitment process, you got to get them on board. You got to get them to join your team. And I felt humbly that was something I did very well. I was always very transparent. I was genuine. I was authentic through the process. I would talk about what do your parents think? What does your family think about this move? And they understood it wasn't just about me getting the best person so we could hit the most goals and we can make as much money as possible, but I was truly and genuinely invested in getting this person to where they wanted to get to in their careers and in their personal lives, and they felt that. And I think that allowed us to get talent that maybe I wouldn't have if I was more transactional. So focusing on the individual and showing them that you're invested in them. And that's something I encourage anyone when they're getting into a new role is look at, you know, are they invested in you as a person versus just you as another number on their sales team? The last thing we talked about is once you retain them, how do you keep them? How do you keep them engaged? I think it's important to clearly articulate a path towards their growth. A lot of people in this next generation want to know, what does it look like? And there's differing thoughts of there is if people are loyal or not. And I don't necessarily have a strong opinion. And I think the person needs to look out for themselves as an individual because the organization isn't always going to do that. But if you could lay out a career path that when you start with our department all the way to being an executive, here's what that could potentially look like. And it's not a guarantee. They obviously have to outperform their competition, but at least they know and they have certainty that there is a clear path and maybe they've seen people come before them. So if you have that track record and those testimonials and referrals, that's going to do a lot and go a long way to keeping those people instead of continuously turning over, which a lot of sales teams, specifically in sports, see. So then next week we talked about as a sales leader running effective sales meetings. So there's team meetings that you have with the entire department, or maybe if you're just seeing a subset, like if you're a manager or director, you're a group of 5 to 10 individuals, how do you control that meeting? Because you're sharing a top level message that needs to resonate with each of them at a high level, but then you take that to an individual perspective, like, hey, that meeting we just had, here's this relates to your team, or here's how it relates to you individually, because sometimes you'll be preaching to the choir if you have to get across a difficult message. And maybe you just want to come back and bring your top people in who are already doing things right. Like, hey, that wasn't for you, so I don't need you to take it a certain way, because I always take it personal when we get challenged. I'm like, well, who do they think they are? They don't think we work hard. They're like, dude, I wasn't talking about you, but I did need to share that for the team because there are individuals on the team who aren't following through the way that we need to. So that was always something I wanted to make sure of as a leader, is that I addressed what that meant specifically to each individual. Then there's the one-on-one meetings, and there's a balance between talking about the deals that are in the pipeline and coaching, but then also the personal side of like, how are they feeling? What's their energy like? And asking those questions. So one thing, if I could go back that I do different that I've heard some of the best sales leaders talk about on podcasts is having a structure going into the meetings and having a format so it's organized. Because I would just come in and they come in like, so what do you want to talk about? And eventually we'd find something that we could hit on and, fill the time of 30 minutes or an hour. But I would definitely be more structured and disciplined with like, all right, come with these things, send it to me in advance so I can come prepared and know what it is that you want to discuss. And some of my better reps did that on their own, but I would formalize that process more. And the last meeting, which is super important that I didn't do enough of, are deal review meetings. So how do you move people through different stages in the pipeline? And then coming prepared to that meeting with, here are the top deals that we have for our team or for each individual. Who do we expect to close in the next 30 days? Or who are people that we lost over the last 30 days that we could potentially save? Or just talk about the reasons that we're losing deals so we can inform our strategy as we move forward. So coming prepared, having an intention to the meeting and not just wasting people's time to just talk about updates, but actionable takeaways that we can get out of that meeting on how we can move deals forward to a decision, whether that's a yes or a no, and move on to the next deal within our pipeline. So after we talked about sales meetings, the next topic that we covered was having difficult conversations. And I said for me, that was something that I struggled with early because one, I was never really in a lot of those difficult conversations because I just did what I was told, going back to when I was a kid. But for me, I also didn't want people to feel uncomfortable. And so a lot of times I projected my own feelings of being scolded or being challenged onto others, where most people, especially your best people, they want that. They like it. And I think at the end of the day, where I've come to, and I truly believe, is you're being selfish if you're not telling somebody something that they need to hear to protect your feelings or to protect your relationship and friendship with that person. So you need to deliver the message that you need to, give tough love, if that's what you want to call it. So we touched on that. And we also talked about in these conversations, leading with empathy, putting yourself in their shoes and understanding that they may be frustrated with you if that's like a frustration you have with like a coworker or a peer, at the executive level, but leading with empathy, understanding that they may have a perspective too, and leaving the space for them to share their feelings as well. And then the last thing I talked about, one of the things that stood out for me in that topic was coming with specific examples. A lot of times we bring emotion to those, like I feel a certain way, or I think this is what you're thinking, but like give tangible examples. When this happened, this is, how that made me feel. Here are specific examples of things that maybe I don't think that you're following through on. And it's tangible. It's not your gut feel or just like an emotional reaction, but like they're actual things. And again, allow that conversation to breathe and don't feel you need to resolve it all right there in the moment. The person needs to digest it and may come back a day or two later and have a conversation. But more times than not, those difficult conversations aren't actually all that difficult, and they go a lot better than the story that we create within our head. Next thing is super important. I talk about this a lot with sales people that I coach, but even more so at the leadership level, time management. Because as a salesperson, you can somewhat control your day. Sometimes there's customers that come up last minute, or issues, or fires you got to put out. But for the most part, you're in charge of your day. When you're a leader and you're leading and managing teams, you're more dependent on your staff. And if you have 10 people, 20, 40 people that all have their own priorities, like you're somewhat dependent on that. So first, you need to clearly communicate boundaries and let them know what those are, because you need to block your time, be able to get done what you need to get done as well. And as nicely as I could say this, be selfish with your time. So clearly articulating your boundaries and communicating them so people know what that is. Delegating is a big piece too. I think as leaders, we want to take on everything. We want to be that hero leader and want to do it all. But at some point, you have to delegate these tasks onto other people so that one, they can grow and learn, but it frees you up so that you can focus and grow yourself and focus on maybe more strategic things or looking at the long-term vision. So delegating some of the more administrative tasks, whether that's to an individual or technology, allowing yourself to get more space within your day to get things done, and then focusing on the top priorities that need to get accomplished. A lot of times we just check stuff off our list. We don't really prioritize it, but looking at all your opportunities and putting them in buckets of green, yellow, red. Green needs to get done. Yellow is urgent or important, but not necessarily urgent. And red, I could put towards the end of the day. And I would do my green stuff first thing in the morning so I can knock it out in case something did come up. Yellow is things that you could get to middle of the day, and red, more administrative type stuff that if it needed to get pushed, that's okay. But you're blocking off your day and doing the like activities all together and managing your day that way, but then also prioritizing the most important things to get done throughout the day. Next week, we talked about inspecting what you expect. And I was a little uncomfortable with that because, it felt a little bit like micromanaging. But I shared an example from one of my first interviews for a sales management role. And I got asked that question and I was stumped because I had never really thought through that. But as a leader, you have expectations and you need to make sure or inspect that it's being followed through on. And that, because at the end of the day, you're held accountable to those numbers. So you can't say, well, I told them to do it. Your boss and yourself, you should expect that it's getting done and also make sure that it's happening. So talk through a few ways you could do that. One, you could use data and technology to get the reporting that you need so you can inspect and see what's happening without bugging people all the time, having to always check in or you manually pulling your reports. Like that was one thing as an early leader that I spent so much time doing. It's like building out these reports. Like one specific, I would do the call report every morning and I would look through the call log and I would type in this spreadsheet and it would take me like an hour to do, where we easily could have set up a system where that just automatically emails that report to me. So I could have saved so much time to focus on coaching or selling or things like that as a new manager. But I was like, oh, I'm a manager. This is what I do. I do the call report and send it out to hold people accountable. So this 2025 now, so 12 plus years since I started that. So there's definitely technology that can help you out with that, and you don't have to do so many manual administrative type tasks. The other thing I talked about is setting clear expectations. We may think in our head of what we want to get accomplished, but do we clearly articulate that and people know what's expected of them? Because then you can inspect. If it's clear that not just, hey, I need you to increase your sales, but I need you to make, or let's talk about the goal is to make 5 sales of a minimum of $5,000 per sale over the next 3 months. That is clear. They know exactly what that means and they could build a strategy around it where increasing sales could be like, I'm just doing things to get more sales than I did the month before. So being super clear with that and articulating it. And then balancing holding people accountable with giving them autonomy. Obviously, you need to hold them accountable, and the more that they show that they can, get a longer leash or get more responsibility, giving them more autonomy, because that's where people grow. That's where people feel inspired. That's where people are motivated. So striking that balance, and I think the more of a track record someone has, the more credibility that you earn and gain, the more autonomy you have to go and work through your day and go chase your numbers and get to your goals. The last topic I talked about was most recent around manager and training programs. And I shared my skepticism on it and the intentions that I didn't think were always pure about it. But I said if I could go back, I would implement one and what it would look like and some of the best practices for it. And the first thing is making sure you get executive buy-in. As much as maybe I would have wanted to do it just on my team, making sure that above me, hey, here's the vision of what I hope this looks like, and I would love your blessing and even participation in it. Because if you get buy-in from the executives, one, there's going to be followed through all the way down, but then you'll get the resources you need to make sure that that happens because it's coming from the top. And if you need to go across teams or across department lines to help build this program, if it's coming from the top, like, hey, this is a key initiative that's going to drive our growth and success, then you'll get a lot more results. You'll have a lot more success that way. The other thing is it can't be a distraction. It can't take you away from sales because these programs, they require time, they require an investment. So making sure that it's additive to your sales efforts. So the responsibilities you're giving people to allow them to develop as leaders is helping drive more revenue or increase your ticket sales or volume or whatever those top level goals are. It's additive to it, and it's not just added responsibility just for the sake of doing it to say you have this program, but it's actually growing the business. And then making sure that you have development for all levels. You have something for people that want to manage. You have something for people that don't want to manage because they get left out sometimes because they're not in this manager training program. But other ways you could help them be a more high level seller, or corporate sales, or B2B sales, and grow them that path. And then the junior people, they're probably not in like a leadership development, but like a growth or professional development, so that when they do get to the point where they're going to be leaders for your team, they've already developed the personal skills and traits that a top leader within your team is going to need. So to tie that all up, those are all the concepts we talked about around creating a winning sales culture from the leadership level, and that's going to lead to long-term sustainable success. So the next series I'm excited to talk through is a concept that I'm putting together as I look at what we offer as a business and some of our services, along with some of the partners that I have here, and looking at the entire customer journey and one, what are the services we offer in each of the parts of the different customer journey? But then also in my coaching and in my training sessions, articulating and helping people with each part of the customer journey, how they can impact that and move people along to eventually to a sale and then becoming a renewing long-term customer. So I didn't come up with this, but I took some of the best concepts from the best marketers and sales leaders I've seen out there to build this framework and kind of name it. So for me, I call it the sports revenue framework. And so it starts with creating awareness. So if someone doesn't know you exist, they can't buy your product. Even if you reach out and try and sell them, there needs to be awareness. So typically that's your marketing team who's doing that. So building a brand around what it is that you offer. And the next step is moving people and creating pipeline. And just for the sake of it, we'll call someone's in your pipeline if they're interested in meeting with one of your salespeople or speaking with one of your salespeople about opportunities. They're not at a close stage yet. They haven't necessarily expressed interest to buy yet, but they're aware and they've agreed to talk to your salespeople. So how do you get people from the awareness to the pipeline stage? Then once they're in your pipeline, how do you make sure that you close them as a new customer? So we'll work with teams and work with salespeople on closing new deals. And that's a big part of our training. And actually, that's where we spend most of our time, but the opportunity is really in getting more people in the pipeline. And then the last step is, once you've sold them, that onboarding process and renewing them and growing and expanding them so that they become a lifelong customer and they're telling your story and giving you referrals. And to wrap around all of that is really your data, your infrastructure layer that you're optimizing for using technology, setting up systems and processes so that efficiently through each stage of the process, you have documented processes, you have best practices, and you're executing at a high level. So I'll talk about each of those and go way more in depth with it, but that's something I'm starting to add towards to my training, and then looking at in each of these areas, what services can we offer as for leave within each of those different parts of the business, where right now we really work from the pipeline getting people into your pipeline all the way through renewal, but also looking to add the systems and processes layer, looking at how we can help people create more awareness around their organization, around their brand, so that at the end of the day, it drives more sales and gets them more customers. So excited to dive into that. So we'll go over that over the next couple weeks and months here. But again, always appreciate you tuning in. Would love to get feedback on this topic and maybe some of the other videos I've shown. And also, like I said, get my subscribers up so I can go back to my daughter's class and tell them that, I've crossed over at least the 30 subscriber mark. But appreciate you tuning in as always, and we'll see you again next week.